On my 37th birthday, my mother slid a blush envelope across the linen at Hartwell Club, her voice smooth as polished glass. From all of us. My sister lifted her phone, ready to capture my humiliation. Inside wasn't a card, but divorce papers, neatly folded, a pen clipped to the corner, their trap complete. They expected tears, begging, collapse. Instead, I signed without flinching, thanked them for the gift, and reached into my clutch. What they didn't know was that I carried my own envelope. An offer letter that would turn their cruel performance into the opening act of my freedom. The private dining room at the Hartwell Club glimmered with staged perfection. White linen stretched tight across the long table, crystal stemware lined in even rows, silver utensils placed with the precision of a jeweller. A low jazz trio spilled notes through hidden speakers. The kind of soundtrack chosen to soften sharp words. Waitstaff moved like a clock wound by invisible hands, every step practiced, every gesture discreet. To anyone passing by, it looked like an elegant birthday celebration. To me, it felt like theatre, one in which I had been cast unwillingly as the fool. I sat between my mother, Evelyn, and my younger sister, Maya. Their bodies leaned slightly toward one another, shoulders tilted to close me out. Evelyn's perfume drifted heavy. A scent of orchids layered over something acrid. She wore pearls that caught the light each time she lifted her wine glass. Maya, glowing with youthful confidence, scrolled on her phone under the table, her lips curving in a smile I recognized too well. The anticipation of someone waiting for a performance to begin. Conversation swirled, but it excluded me. Evelyn asked a server about the wine vintage, as though I weren't there. Maya whispered something about lighting and angles, her voice just loud enough to suggest a plan that didn't need words. My husband, Ethan, sat across from me, his eyes avoiding mine, as if his glass of water were the most fascinating object in the room. The distance between us felt greater than the polished table could explain. Then Evelyn set her glass down with a click that cut through the jazz. She reached into her purse and drew out an envelope. Blush pink, embossed with silver butterflies dancing across its surface. The gesture was deliberate, theatrical, designed to draw every gaze. "From all of us," she said smoothly, her eyes fixed on my face. She slid the envelope toward me, her manicured fingers resting on it a heartbeat longer than necessary. Maya raised her phone, angling it with practiced precision. The lens caught the candlelight, a glint that pierced me like a needle. In that moment, the phone became more than a device. It became a weapon. A record of my humiliation they intended to preserve forever. My stomach tightened, my hands damp against the linen. Still, I reached for the envelope. The paper felt heavy, the way dread does. I eased the flap open, my breath shallow. Inside, not a birthday card, not even the hollow sentiment of a gift certificate. Instead, thick legal pages, folded and clipped. The heading stared at me in bold type. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My throat constricted, dry as dust. Around me, the clinking of silver on porcelain grew distant, like the echo of a bell underwater. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. Evelyn's eyes glowed with satisfaction. Maya's phone tilted closer. Ethan's shoulders tensed as though he already rehearsed the fallout. They were waiting for tears, begging collapse, the spectacle they had staged. But my body surprised me. The tremor in my hands steadied. My breath leveled. My pulse no longer raced. It beat with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If this was their performance, I would not play my assigned part. I picked up the pen clipped neatly to the packet. Its weight was almost comical. An accessory chosen to make surrender easy. Without hesitation, I pressed the nib to paper and signed my name across the line. The ink flowed smoothly, confident, final. Silence rippled outward from the table, swallowing the false laughter and empty chatter. I folded the papers again and slid them back across the table. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm, clear, cutting through the jazz like glass shattering. My mother's hand froze halfway to her wineglass. Maya's recording faltered, the phone dipping an inch. Ethan stared as though he hadn't considered this possibility, that I might choose dignity over despair. For a fraction of a second, Evelyn's mask slipped. The satisfaction drained from her features, replaced by a flicker of confusion. It was gone quickly, but I saw it. A fracture, a hairline crack in her perfect composure. It was enough to tell me that the script had been stolen from her hands. The jazz resumed its rhythm, but the song had changed. The room no longer belonged to them. I had turned their trap into my stage, and though they didn't yet understand it, this was only the beginning. The silence lingered like smoke after a match. The signed papers lying between us as if they were no more significant than a used napkin. I let the pause stretch, felt the weight of their anticipation collapse into unease. Then I leaned back, smoothed the clutch in my lap, and let my lips curve into the smallest smile. "Thank you for the gift of freedom," I said, my voice steady, deliberate. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, a flash of something sharp cutting through her facade. Maya lifted her phone again, desperate to reclaim control, to capture my breakdown, delayed. What she didn't realize was that the show was already over, and I had written the final act. I slipped my hand into the clutch and drew out a second envelope. Ivory, with the crest of Luminara Grand Hotel pressed into its corner. My fingers rested on its surface, letting the shimmer of embossed lettering catch the candlelight. "And I have something in return," I added, sliding it onto the table, beside the divorce packet. "From me." The reaction was instantaneous. The clink of silverware ceased, chairs stilled, even the jazz seemed to hush. Maya froze, mid-record, confusion knitting her brows. Ethan's mouth parted, a question caught before it could leave his lips. Evelyn remained very still, the pearl at her throat rising and falling with each measured breath. I opened the envelope with slow precision, the rustle of paper loud in the quiet. Inside was the letter I had guarded for 3 days, an official job offer from the Luminara Grand. I unfolded it, letting the pages lie flat on the linen, their letterhead gleaming under chandelier light. "Starting salary," I read aloud, my tone businesslike. "45,000 annually. Comprehensive benefits. Housing included. 2-week start date. Management track." Gasps rippled down the table. A fork slipped from someone's hand, clattering against porcelain. A waiter passing the doorway paused mid-step, eyes flicking toward me before he schooled his expression back to neutrality. Yet a corner of his mouth betrayed a smile, subtle but real. Linda Harrington, one of Evelyn's oldest friends, and the queen of whispered judgments, leaned forward. Her sharp gaze softened, curiosity replacing disdain. She glanced at Evelyn as though re-evaluating everything she thought she knew. Her brow arched, the faintest acknowledgement that perhaps the daughter, long dismissed, had just outmaneuvered the matriarch. I continued, my voice low but firm enough to reach the edges of the room. 3 years at Santoro's taught me resilience, efficiency, and service under pressure. Qualities they value. Qualities my family... I let the sentence trail off, the unfinished words more pointed than any accusation. The air grew heavy, charged, as though the chandeliers themselves strained to hear what would happen next. Evelyn's hand trembled faintly on her wineglass stem, the first visible crack in her control. Maya lowered her phone at last, her screen catching my reflection, not broken or humiliated, but composed, triumphant. I gathered both envelopes, the one Evelyn had given me and the one I brought, and stacked them neatly, two versions of my life, side by side, one an attempt to erase me, the other a door opening wide. "Consider it an exchange," I said, rising from my chair. "You give me your dismissal, and I give you proof you were wrong." Chairs scraped lightly as other diners leaned to watch. A murmur passed from table to table. Some looked away out of politeness, others stared openly, hungry for the drama that had unfolded in a room meant for celebration. I tucked the offer back into my clutch, left the divorce papers resting on the table like discarded script pages, and turned toward the door. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step measured, steady, echoing louder than the jazz that had resumed. At the threshold, I paused. The revolving door reflected my image, upright, shoulders squared, eyes forward. The glass caught Evelyn and Maya behind me, their faces pale, their performance unravelled. In that reflection, I saw the story they had tried to trap me in, and the story I had chosen instead. Without another word, I pushed through the door. The night air outside was cool, cleansing. The city lights stretched before me, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of their judgment slide from my shoulders. They had given me a stage to humiliate me. I had turned it into my exit, carrying dignity, freedom, and the first proof of a future they would never control. 3 mornings before the dinner at Hartwell, I padded down the staircase of our family home, hoping for nothing more than a cup of coffee before the rush of my shift at Santoro's. The house was quiet, curtains drawn against the winter light, air carrying the faint smell of lemon polish. I expected emptiness. Ethan was already gone to work, and silence usually blanketed the kitchen at this hour. But when I entered, I froze. My mother Evelyn sat at the table with reading glasses perched on her nose. Spread before her was a stack of papers thick enough to resemble a college thesis. She leaned close, pen in hand, making sharp red marks along the margins. Her posture was intent, predatory, like a hawk studying its prey. The sight was so incongruous with the morning calm that for a second I doubted what I saw. When she noticed me, she moved quickly, far too quickly for a woman her age. She gathered the papers into a neat pile, slid them into a blush envelope, and laid her hand over it as if nothing unusual had occurred. "Good morning, dear," she said. The words startled me more than the documents. Dear. She had never called me that before. In her vocabulary, I was often your daughter when speaking to relatives, or simply she when annoyance coloured her tone. Never dear. The endearment slid out of her mouth awkwardly, like a shoe that didn't fit. Her eyes tested my reaction, measuring whether I believed the sweetness or saw through it. I poured my coffee slowly, pretending not to notice the envelope she tapped rhythmically with her finger. She asked about my work schedule, voice airy, detached, as though her sudden interest in my life wasn't suspicious. I nodded, kept my answers brief. Moments like this weren't new. They were just sharper versions of the pattern I'd lived with for years. I had been the scapegoat in this family long before divorce papers were drafted. At holidays, Evelyn orchestrated her subtle exclusions, going around the table at Thanksgiving, praising each child's accomplishments while skipping mine altogether. Pressing her lips into a smile when Maya announced promotions or opportunities while brushing off my long hours at Santoro's as temporary work. Group chats followed the same rhythm. Maya shared photos from events, her captions littered with humble brags about new contacts and projects. Evelyn responded with heart emojis and affirmations. When I posted a snapshot of the restaurant team after a long night's shift, Evelyn left it unread. Once, when I messaged about earning Employee of the Month, she replied only, "Maybe one day you'll find something more stable." Her private conversations cut deeper. After Easter dinner one year, she pulled me aside with a glass of wine, still in her hand, telling me that women who linger too long in service jobs become invisible. She said it like advice, but her tone made it a condemnation. At family gatherings, she reintroduced me not as her daughter, but as the one still figuring things out. I had tried to shake it off, to bury myself in the rhythm of honest work. Santoro's restaurant was demanding trays that bent my wrists, soap that cracked the skin on my hands, double shifts that left my legs aching. Yet there I was valued. Mr. Santoro noticed when I stayed late to help the new staff. Lupita, the head cook, slipped me extra plates of pasta when she saw my exhaustion. Nico, the youngest busboy, said I kept the place running like an engine. But the warmth of colleagues couldn't fully mend the coldness of my own blood. Each time I folded another rejection letter, "We regret to inform you," I could almost hear Evelyn's voice behind it. "You are not enough." My laptop became an altar of dismissal, inbox filling with polite rejections that all said the same thing: not qualified, not suitable, not the right fit. To combat the despair, I signed up for evening classes at the community college, business basics, communication. I walked into classrooms smelling of chalk and pencil shavings, surrounded by people younger than me, but somehow treated as peers. For 3 hours a week, professors praised my essays, classmates asked for my notes. I drove home with hope clutched like a fragile bird, only to have it crushed when Evelyn asked why I was wasting money on hobbies instead of finding a real path. That morning in the kitchen, watching her conceal papers inside that pink envelope, the weight of all those years condensed into one sharp truth. My mother didn't just doubt me, she had been plotting my dismissal from her narrative altogether. And yet, beneath the ache, a flicker of resolve stirred. I didn't know then that within days, a single phone call would shift the ground under her carefully laid plans. But I felt it, faint but rising, the possibility that her script for me was not the only one being written. It was later that same week, 3 days before my birthday dinner, when the unexpected call came. My phone buzzed on the counter as I was folding Ethan's shirts, the ordinary rhythm of chores filling another grey afternoon. The number was unfamiliar. I almost let it go to voicemail. Telemarketers were constant lately, but something in me answered. "Hello, is this Lauren Pierce?" The voice was warm, professional, female. "This is Sophia Ramirez from the Luminara Grand Hotel. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." My breath caught. Luminara Grand. I remembered the night I'd sent out that application in a blur of desperation, one of dozens flung into the void of online portals. I hadn't expected to hear back. Yet, here was a voice that pronounced my name as though it mattered. "Yes, this is Lauren," I managed, forcing my tone steady though my heart hammered. "I've reviewed your application for our guest services coordinator position," Sophia continued, her words clear. deliberate. What stood out to us was your restaurant background. Candidates with that level of hands-on customer service often thrive in hospitality. You know how to anticipate needs, manage pressure, and keep people calm when things are busy. Those qualities can't always be taught. Her words stunned me. For months I had heard only variations of not enough, not qualified, but here was someone telling me my very experience, those cracked hands, those endless shifts, was valuable. My throat tightened, but not with shame this time, with relief. Sophia explained the position in detail. Salary in the mid-40s, full benefits, and, most astonishing of all, employee housing, in a furnished apartment only minutes from the hotel. We find it helps our staff focus on growth, she said. No commute, no worries about rent, just stability. I pressed my palm against the table to steady myself. A life 3 hours away from Evelyn's suffocating scrutiny. Independence carved into stone, backed by benefits and housing. It was more than an opportunity, it was escape. We scheduled a phone interview for the next day. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen, staring at the folded laundry as if it belonged to someone else's life. For the first time in years, I felt a door creak open that hadn't been built by my family's permission. The following afternoon, Sophia called again. Her questions were pointed but fair. How I handled rushes at Santoro's, what I learned from difficult guests, how I trained newer staff. I answered with ease. For once, my words didn't feel like excuses, they felt like proof. She laughed softly at one point, saying, "Honestly, your references made my job easy." "References?" I asked. "Yes, Mr. Santoro and Chef Lupita both spoke glowingly about you. Reliable, calm under pressure, a natural leader. They couldn't say enough." Heat rose behind my eyes, though no one was there to see. My boss and mentor had given me more dignity in a few sentences than my own family had in years. That night I stopped by Santoro's on my way to class, thanked them both quietly. Lupita waved me off, pretending to be busy with her pans, though her eyes shone. Mr. Santoro just patted my shoulder. "You've earned it, kid. Don't forget where you started, but don't let it hold you back." 2 days later, the official offer arrived by email. The PDF glowed from my screen, elegant letterhead stamped with the Luminara crest. Guest Services Coordinator, starting salary $45,000, benefits and housing included. Start date 2 weeks. I printed 3 copies, folded one carefully, and slid it into my clutch. The paper felt almost talismanic, a charm against the curse of being unwanted. I imagined Evelyn's face if she ever saw it, but quickly tucked the thought away. No, this was mine, not hers. I decided then I would not tell anyone, not Ethan, who would carry the news back to her in the guise of sharing. Not Maya, who would twist it into performance. Certainly not Evelyn, who would seek to tarnish even this victory. I would hold it close, let it warm me from the inside, and wait. Wait until the very stage they built to humiliate me. My birthday dinner at Hartwell, when their pink envelope of dismissal collided with my ivory envelope of promise. They thought they were scripting my downfall. They had no idea I had already written my own next act. The invitation had arrived with a flourish, Evelyn's handwriting looping across embossed cardstock, gilded with gold edges. "We want to celebrate you properly," she had written, as though those words erased years of neglect. The location was the Hartwell Club, one of the most exclusive venues in the city. Members-only dining, chandeliers that glittered like constellations, walls lined with oil paintings of forgotten patrons. To the outside world, it would look like affection. To me, it reeked of theatre. Evelyn spared no expense. The guest list included family acquaintances who barely knew my birthday, let alone my struggles. Maya circulated reminders on group chats, sending checklists of outfits, seating charts, and photo opportunities. She drafted hashtags, Hartwell celebration, family first, 37 and thriving, branding the night like a corporate campaign. I scrolled past her messages with a hollow laugh. She wasn't planning a dinner, she was producing content. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had never lifted a finger for past birthdays, often letting the day slide by with only a curt text. Now suddenly there was champagne and chandeliers. It wasn't for me, it was for the spectacle of discarding me with an audience. Still, I prepared myself with care. In my small bedroom, I laid out the navy dress I had chosen days before. It was simple, elegant, cut to flatter without begging for attention. The fabric felt strong under my fingers, like armour tailored for battle. That morning I visited Sandra's salon, where the familiar scent of hairspray and curling irons enveloped me. She wove my hair into soft waves, each strand tamed into place, until the mirror reflected someone I barely recognised. A version of me that looked poised, unbreakable. Sandra caught my expression. "Big night?" she asked, teasing but kind. "You could say that," I replied, letting a private smile touch my lips. When I returned home, I examined the details again. Something about the invitation unsettled me. The way Evelyn had written "from all of us" with a flourish, too rehearsed, or the way Maya's checklist emphasised reaction shots. They weren't subtle. I thought back to the subtle signs of orchestration that had always been there. At family holidays, Evelyn would seat me beside distant relatives rather than immediate ones, an invisible relegation to the margins. At Thanksgiving, my place card was once written in smaller script than the others, a detail so minor most would miss. But to me, it screamed of deliberate positioning. Now, at Hartwell, the stage was simply grander. On the day of the dinner, I arrived early enough to catch the finishing touches. Staff adjusted linens, polished glassware, arranged candles. I noted my seat, directly beneath a spotlight that poured down from the chandelier, angling just enough to illuminate my face. Cameras would capture every flicker of expression. Maya's doing, no doubt. The napkins struck me next. Everyone else's folded neatly in crisp white. Mine was pale blush, a shade too close to the envelope I had seen Evelyn slip into her purse days earlier. A signal, perhaps, or a private joke. I smoothed it flat, refusing to give it power. Even the spacing of chairs told a story. Maya's seat faced me at the perfect angle for recording, Ethan's across, as though set to watch me unravel. Evelyn, of course, placed at my side, the queen orchestrating her final tableau. The more I looked, the more it became obvious. This was not a family dinner. It was a production. Yet, rather than shrinking, I felt my spine straighten. If they wanted a performance, I would give them one, but not the one they expected. Beneath my dress, tucked in my clutch, the offer letter waited like a secret script, invisible to every player at the table. I dabbed a touch of perfume, checked my reflection one last time. My face looked calm, almost serene, but inside a quiet determination burned. They thought they had written the ending to my story. What they didn't know was that I had already drafted the next chapter. As I walked into the grand hall of Hartwell that evening, the chandeliers sparkled, cameras gleamed, and the stage was set. I saw the trap for what it was, every detail sharpened into focus. And instead of dread, I felt only a strange, rising calm, the stillness before a storm that I knew would break in my favour. The evening gathered momentum like a staged play. Guests trickled in wearing silk and polished shoes, each one pausing at the entrance to admire the chandeliers before finding their seats. Waiters glided by with champagne flutes, their trays catching the light, as if choreographed. Laughter rose in practiced bursts, a chorus meant to suggest warmth. I settled into my chair, aware of the spotlight still angling down onto me. Maya sat across, her phone already out, screen angled as though she were only checking messages. But I knew better. Every movement of her thumb, every shift of her gaze was too intentional. She was waiting. It happened in a flash, almost careless. She leaned toward Evelyn to whisper something and tilted her phone too far. For a brief second, the screen glowed toward me. The words were bold across the top of the chat. Post right when she cries. My stomach clenched, but not with fear, recognition. This wasn't speculation anymore. The dinner was a stage, and I was cast as the spectacle. I met Maya's eyes, let mine linger on the phone, then looked away. She didn't realise I had seen. Her smirk faltered for just a moment, her lips pressing tight before she resumed her act. That single glimpse told me everything. They were already planning the moment of my collapse, the digital debut of my ruin. I reached for my clutch, fingers brushing the envelope, tucked safely inside. The crisp edges pressed into my palm like a pulse of defiance. I inhaled slowly, counting each breath the way I used to count plates balanced on a tray during a dinner rush. 1, 2, 3. My heartbeat steadied. Around me, conversation carried on. Evelyn leaned in to praise Maya's dedication to capturing memories, her voice smooth enough to mask the cruelty beneath. Ethan laughed politely at a joke from a cousin, but his laughter rang hollow, brittle. I studied their faces with a detachment I hadn't felt before. It was like watching actors recite lines they'd rehearsed too often. The food arrived, an endless parade of delicacies plated with precision. My appetite was absent, but I let the motions carry me, fork lifted, glass tilted, napkin dabbed. Beneath the ritual, my focus remained on the envelope. Each time I touched the clutch, I reminded myself that I held more than paper. I held my escape, my validation, my proof that I was not what they believed. Maya kept glancing at me, the way a hunter checks a trap. Her phone glowed faintly under the table, and once I caught the faint reflection of my own face on her screen. She was rehearsing my downfall in real time, curating angles for maximum effect. But instead of dread, I felt a coil of calm tighten inside me. If they wanted tears, I would give them ink. If they wanted collapse, I would give them composure. My role was changing before their eyes, though they couldn't see it yet. I let my gaze wander around the room. Crystal chandeliers glittered above, forks tapped plates in sync, waiters refilled glasses with flawless timing. To anyone else, it was a birthday celebration dressed in luxury. To me, it was a countdown, each detail another tick toward the moment when their script would implode. I lifted my glass and let the rim tap lightly against the knife resting nearby. The sound was sharp, metallic, ringing out like a clock striking the hour. A few heads turned, smiling absently, assuming it was an accident. But for me, the chime landed differently. It was the tolling of a countdown, the reminder that time was not on their side but mine. I glanced at Maya once more. She was busy typing now, probably updating her audience in waiting, preparing them for the big reveal. She thought she held the power, but she had no idea that I was counting down too. Not to my breakdown, but to theirs. The air around me thickened with anticipation. I could feel the edges of the moment approaching, a shift in the atmosphere like the pressure before a storm. Every sound, every flicker of light seemed heightened. The scrape of a chair leg, the hiss of champagne poured too quickly, the faint hum of jazz, all of it layered into the rhythm of a clock winding tighter. Then, from the far side of the room, a waiter dropped a spoon. It struck the tile floor with a sharp clang, ringing clear and cold. The sound threaded through the room, silencing chatter for a heartbeat. To others, it was nothing. To me, it was confirmation. The countdown had begun. The revolving doors of the Hartwell Club closed behind me with a whisper. The city air crisp against my face. I walked into the night with my head high, clutch tight in hand, heels clicking on pavement like punctuation marks. For a moment, the performance they had staged was behind me. I thought perhaps silence would follow. I was wrong. By the next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications. Maya had wasted no time. The video appeared on social media first in a small private group she curated, then spread like wildfire through friends of friends. The caption read, "Birthday disaster when dignity crumbles." The clip showed me opening the pink envelope, my face pale under the spotlight, the legal words visible enough for viewers to guess. Maya had cut the footage right after that moment, ending before I signed calmly, before I laid down my own envelope. The video ended on a frozen frame of my stunned expression, designed to tell one story only: collapse. For an hour, comments piled in, exactly what Maya wanted: pitying, mocking, voyeuristic. But then something shifted. Guests from the party, people who had been in that room, began commenting. "That's not what happened," one wrote. "She didn't fall apart. She signed right in front of them." Another chimed in, "You cut out the part where she announced her job offer. I was there, and trust me, she owned that room." The tide turned fast. Viewers asked for the full video. Demands for context drowned out Maya's supporters. Screenshots of comments circulated. The narrative she tried to build crumbled in real time, replaced by another: the woman who had refused humiliation and left with dignity intact. I scrolled through it all in silence, sipping my coffee. My hands didn't shake. Instead, a strange pride filled me. They had built a stage to strip me bare, and now their own evidence was betraying them. Twist number 5. The trap had backfired spectacularly. Then came Ethan's text. "We should talk," just 3 words, glowing on the screen like an afterthought. The man who had angled his phone at my face, waiting to capture my ruin, now wanted conversation. Perhaps he felt regret. Perhaps he realized the tide of opinion had shifted. That siding with Evelyn and Maya had placed him on the wrong end of history. Whatever his reason, I had none. I deleted the message without replying. Some doors, once closed, remain locked forever. Instead, I called Anita Patel, a lawyer recommended quietly by a colleague at Santoro's. We met in a modest office that smelled faintly of leather and fresh paper. Anita was sharp-eyed, her questions precise. I handed her the video Maya had posted, along with screenshots of the comments from party guests. She leaned back in her chair, adjusting her glasses as she watched. "This is damning," she said flatly. "Not for you, for them. This is calculated humiliation, public, premeditated, recorded. Judges don't look kindly on orchestrated cruelty, especially when there's proof it was designed as entertainment." Her words settled into me like a balm. For months, years even, I had been gaslit into believing my mother's dismissals were just concern, that Maya's digs were harmless jokes, that Ethan's silence was neutrality. But now I had something undeniable. Evidence. Evidence that they had plotted, timed, and executed a campaign to humiliate me. evidence that could not be spun into care or tradition. Anita outlined the next steps: documentation, filing, ensuring the video was preserved as unaltered proof. She spoke with calm authority, a voice I found myself trusting. For once, I wasn't alone in the fight. I wasn't the scapegoat scrambling to defend myself without witnesses. I had a professional in my corner, one who recognized what had been done and called it by its name: abuse. When I left her office, the winter sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I drew my coat tighter, but inside I felt warmed by a quiet fire. Evelyn and Maya thought they had delivered the final blow with that envelope. In reality, they had handed me the strongest weapon imaginable, their own recorded cruelty. The boomerang was already in motion, swinging back toward them. And this time I wouldn't need to lift a hand. The truth would strike for me. 2 days after my meeting with Anita, an email notification lit up my phone while I was wiping down the counters at home. The sender's name made my breath hitch: Luminara Grand Hotel. My hands trembled for a heartbeat as I opened it, but steadied when I read the subject line: Formal offer of employment. The letter was everything Sophia had promised, this time in black and white: guest services coordinator, starting salary $45,000, full benefits, housing included. Start date 2 weeks from Monday. Attached were forms for acceptance, the contract pages marked where to sign. At the bottom, a line leapt out at me: Please visit Human Resources to collect your keys for staff housing upon your first day. Keys. Real, tangible freedom reduced to a single word. I printed the contract immediately, the hum of the machine filling the kitchen like a hymn. Then I sat down at the table and signed my name with a hand steady as stone. Evelyn had forced me to sign one set of papers meant to erase me. Now I signed another that rewrote me completely. When I returned the documents electronically, Sophia replied within the hour, warm and congratulatory. "We're thrilled to welcome you, Lauren," she wrote. "Your background is exactly what we're looking for. I'll see you soon." I pressed my palm to the paper copy, folded it carefully, and slid it into the clutch beside the now infamous pink envelope. 2 lives, 2 outcomes, both sealed with ink, but only one belonged to me. That evening, as I cooked a simple dinner for myself, my phone buzzed again. A message on social media from an unexpected source, Linda Harrington. She was one of Evelyn's longest-standing allies, a woman whose words carried weight in the social circles my mother adored. I hesitated before opening it, expecting venom. Instead, the message read, "I was at Hartwell. What you did took courage. I've seen women fold under far less. For what it's worth, I think you handled yourself brilliantly." I stared at the words, stunned. Then another line followed. "If you ever need a connection outside your family's shadow, let me know. Some of us are not blind to strength when we see it." I sat back, breath leaving me in a rush. Evelyn had ruled her social sphere for decades, wielding reputation like a crown. But now a crack appeared. Linda wasn't abandoning her outright. People like her never did. But she was acknowledging me, shifting her gaze. It was a bridge away from Evelyn's control. And it was Evelyn herself who had handed me the hammer to build it. Twist number 6 had landed, not in cruelty this time, but in grace. I wasn't only stepping into a new job, I was stepping into an entirely new orbit. One where my mother's disdain no longer dictated the terms. That night, I pulled the navy dress from my closet, the same one I'd worn at Hartwell, and hung it carefully beside the freshly pressed uniform sent from Luminara's HR department. The blazer and tailored skirt looked professional, crisp, everything Evelyn claimed I could never achieve. I stood there for a long time, listening to the stillness of the room. My heart beat evenly, no longer erratic with dread. Each thump matched the rhythm of possibility. I imagined the click of keys in my hand, the quiet of my own apartment, mornings free from scrutiny, nights filled with progress instead of shame. The uniform swayed slightly on its hanger, catching the faint breeze from the window. In its folds, I saw not just fabric, but transformation. For years I had been told service work made me small. Now service work had opened the door to something grander. I touched the sleeve, felt the smooth fabric beneath my fingertips, and allowed myself the smallest smile. This was not armour anymore. This was identity, chosen by me, validated by a world larger than Evelyn's table. As I turned off the light and closed the closet door, the silence held no menace, only calm. My pulse was steady, my breathing deep. For the first time in a long while, I slept soundly, knowing that in 2 weeks I would walk into a lobby filled with marble and light, carrying not shame but purpose. The pendulum had swung, the boomerang had returned, and this time it was in my favour. The first morning I walked into the Luminara Grand, the city seemed to tilt on its axis. The revolving doors whispered open, spilling me into a lobby carved from marble and light. Columns soared toward chandeliers that shimmered like frozen rain, every surface polished until it reflected ambition itself. For a heartbeat, I stood still, clutching the envelope of HR documents and the key card that would open my new apartment upstairs. My name wasn't just on paper anymore, it was on a brass plate pinned neatly to my blazer. Lauren Pierce, Guest Services Coordinator. The sight of it sent a current through me. My mother's words, service makes you invisible, rattled faintly in the background, but here, service was the crown jewel. I adjusted the blazer, straightened my shoulders, and approached the front desk where Jessica Park, my new supervisor, was waiting. She was sharp, poised, a woman who carried authority without raising her voice. "Welcome to your new world," she said, her handshake firm. "Today, you'll learn how to see the lobby differently, not as a hallway, but as a stage where every detail tells our guests who we are." She walked me through the rhythm of the space. How to scan faces for signs of fatigue or impatience before words were spoken. How to notice when luggage wheels squeaked, when a child tugged too hard at a parent's sleeve, when a businessman checked his watch twice in 1 minute. Our job, Jessica explained, is to solve problems before guests realise they exist. Anticipation is our currency. I absorbed every word. At Santoro's, I had learned to juggle 6 tables at once, remembering drink preferences, keeping track of birthdays, smoothing tempers when orders were delayed. Here, those same instincts translated seamlessly. Only now, instead of balancing plates, I was balancing experiences. Instead of apologising for kitchen mistakes, I was orchestrating impressions that made strangers feel like royalty. By the end of the first week, the night shift staff had already begun to trust me. During the midnight lull, when the lobby hushed and the chandeliers dimmed, we swapped stories. Housekeepers told me which suites creaked under the weight of history. Bellman joked about guests who brought trunks instead of suitcases. I listened, laughed, and learned. One evening, when a last-minute VIP check-in caught everyone off guard, I stepped forward instinctively. The guest, a film producer with an entourage, was irritated by the delay in his suite preparation. The team hesitated, but I smiled, offered champagne, and personally guided him to a temporary lounge area. while housekeeping rushed to finish. I kept his assistant occupied with questions about his latest project, and by the time the suite was ready, the man was laughing. He left a note later. Guest services coordinator Pierce handled my stay flawlessly. Jessica called me into her office the next morning. She tapped the letter with her manicured finger. "This is what I mean, Lauren. You didn't just manage a crisis. You turned it into an opportunity. Remember that." Walking out of her office, I felt taller. For once, my worth wasn't measured against degrees I didn't have or milestones I hadn't reached. It was measured in results, in presence, in the ability to turn chaos into calm. At night, in my new apartment above the hotel, I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. The furnished space was modest but gleaming, neutral walls, a small balcony overlooking the city, a bed that didn't creak. I set my uniform in the closet, polished shoes beneath it, and pressed my palm to the key card hanging on its lanyard. It was more than plastic. It was proof that competence was not shameful. It was salvation. The contrast wasn't lost on me. In Evelyn's house, I had once folded Ethan's shirts under the weight of her disdain, listening to her sighs about wasted potential. Here, I folded my own blazers, crisp and new, in a space no one could belittle. The first week at Luminara taught me something Evelyn had never understood. Work is not a wound when it is recognised, respected and rewarded. It becomes power. It becomes revenge of the quietest, sharpest kind, the revenge of competence. As I lay down that night, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I smiled into the dark. I was no longer their scapegoat. I was a professional with a nameplate, a title, and a stage larger than any Evelyn could control. The story of me had already begun to change. The true test came on a Friday evening 2 months into the job. The lobby hummed with energy, suitcases rolling across marble, heels striking in sync, the concierge phones lit up in a chorus of demands. Every suite had been promised to someone important, and the reservation board glowed red with alerts. That was when the power flickered once, twice, and died. For a heartbeat, the Luminara Grand fell silent. Chandeliers dimmed, computers blinked out, even the fountains stuttered to a halt. A few guests gasped, others snapped irritably at their watches. It was the kind of moment that could shatter reputation in seconds. Jessica was out of town on a corporate retreat. The staff looked at me, wide-eyed, waiting for instruction. My pulse raced, but muscle memory from years at Santoro's surged up. Crisis wasn't new to me, it was my native language. "Candles," I told housekeeping. "Battery lanterns from storage now." I motioned to the front desk. "Print the guest manifest. Backup copy should be in the safe." Bellmen clustered close, anxious, but I steadied them. "We'll move VIPs into prepared lounges with complimentary champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Anyone delayed more than 20 minutes gets a voucher for spa credit. No exceptions." Within minutes, the lobby glowed with soft candlelight, waiters circling with trays of sparkling water and wine. Guests who moments earlier had looked ready to riot now relaxed into the novelty, some even snapping photos of the romantic ambience. The greater problem, however, was overbooking. Several suites had been double assigned, a mistake hidden until the outage knocked out the system. I scanned the printed manifest, scribbling notes in the margins. Then I called for 3 bellmen and whispered instructions. Within an hour, we had reshuffled assignments. 2 executives who knew each other well enough to share adjoining suites were relocated with apologies and complimentary upgrades. while a visiting couple was offered the hotel's penthouse at no additional charge. I watched tempers ease as keys changed hands, tension dissolving with each amenity basket we delivered. By the time the power roared back to life, the Luminara lobby was calm, buzzing with satisfied guests sipping free champagne. To them, the outage was a minor hiccup, transformed into a story they'd boast about. The night the hotel went dark and still managed to feel luxurious. Later, in the staff office, I collapsed into a chair, sweat beading at my hairline. But when Jessica returned Monday and read the incident report, her expression was almost reverent. "You didn't just hold the line," she said. "You turned a disaster into an opportunity. That's management." 2 days later, HR handed me a letter. Promotion to Assistant Guest Services Manager, effective immediately, along with a raise. My title changed on the brass plate outside the office door. Colleagues clapped me on the back, and even the most seasoned staff nodded with respect. That same evening, as if the universe were weaving threads tighter, an email arrived with the subject line: "Invitation to lead Hartwell Charity Gala Coordination." I froze as I read it. The client listed was none other than the Hartwell Club, chaired by Evelyn Pierce, my mother. The words blurred as I stared at the screen. The very institution that had once been weaponized against me was now coming under my supervision, on my terms, in my domain. A seed of irony lodged deep in my chest. This was no accident. Fate had laid another twist at my feet. I accepted the assignment with a click, heart pounding. Already I imagined Evelyn walking into my lobby, forced to acknowledge not a scapegoat, but a manager, the woman she had tried so hard to erase. That night, after my shift, I stood on the balcony of my apartment. City lights spread beneath me like a sea of stars. The hum of traffic floated upward, a reminder of movement, of life still unfurling. I wrapped my hands around the railing and let the cool wind press against my face. The skyline glittered vast and indifferent, but to me it felt like recognition. I had climbed out of the shadows of their disapproval, out of the endless cycle of being diminished. Here, above the city, I was elevated in more than height. The boomerang had swung again. This time, it carried me to the highest point I had known yet. The story was far from over, but in that moment, the arc had reached a crest. For the first time in years, I felt not just free, but triumphant. The night of the Hartwell Charity Gala arrived with the weight of inevitability. I stood in the marble lobby of the Luminara Grand, headset in place, clipboard in hand, the team around me moving like a well-oiled machine. Red velvet ropes guided arriving guests toward the registration desk where bellmen in white gloves offered champagne flutes. Spotlights illuminated banners hung along the walls. Hartwell Gala, managed by Lauren Pierce, Assistant Guest Services Manager. I had fought for every letter of that title, and now it gleamed above my head for all to see. The first surge of guests swept through, their gowns rustling like silk storms, their laughter echoing off marble columns. I greeted donors, board members, old acquaintances of the Hartwell Club. Each handshake, each nod was a declaration. I belonged here, and then they entered. Evelyn's heels clicked a sharp rhythm across the marble, her posture regal as ever. On her arm, Maya floated like a shadow, her phone clutched in hand even here, ready to frame the evening into content. For one exquisite moment, they did not recognize where they stood. Evelyn's gaze swept over the banners, her expression polite, unreadable. Then it landed on my name, her steps faltered. Just slightly, but enough. Maya noticed next. She glanced at the signage, then at me standing confidently with my clipboard. Her smirk dissolved. Before she could recover, 2 of my staff approached them with flawless timing, bowing their heads in greeting. "Good evening, Ms. Pierce," one of them said to me. "Everything is ready as you instructed." The words sliced through the space like a spotlight beam. Maya's phone dipped, and Evelyn's hand tightened on her clutch. They were in my world now. The gala unfolded smoothly at first. Guests filtered toward the ballroom, admiring floral arrangements, the silent auction tables glittering with curated items. I coordinated earpieces and schedules, directing servers to refill trays, checking the lighting on the stage. It was my orchestra, and I conducted it with ease. Then came the twist. Near the middle of the evening, one of the auditors from the event's corporate sponsor approached me, her expression tight. "We need the updated communication logs," she said. "There's a discrepancy in the approvals for tonight's guest flow. If it isn't resolved, we can't release the pledged funds." I blinked, scanning the folder in my hands. Everything had been meticulously logged on our end. But then she produced a copy of the Hartwell Club's internal schedule, the one distributed weeks ago by none other than Maya. The dates and timelines were subtly altered, creating a gap in approval that now threatened the charity's credibility. I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. I had every right, every bit of authority to shut down the event until the discrepancy was resolved. Evelyn's empire, her pride and reputation, could collapse right here in my lobby. One word from me, and the charity gala would end in scandal. I looked across the room. Evelyn was mingling, laughing too loudly, unaware of the storm brewing. Maya hovered nearby, glancing nervously at her phone. The choice was mine. And in that choice, the real revenge presented itself. I straightened my blazer, lowered my voice, and told the auditor calmly, "Give me 20 minutes. Then I gathered my staff. We pulled the communication logs from our system, matched them against receipts and vendor confirmations, rebuilt the paper trail piece by piece. I filled in every gap Maya had created, smoothing the edges until the sponsor's file was whole. When I handed the corrected binder back, the auditor's relief was palpable. "You saved this event," she said. I smiled faintly. "That's my job." Evelyn would never know how close she had come to disgrace. Or maybe she would one day, when whispers filtered back about the near collapse of her gala. But what mattered was this: I had the power to destroy her stage and chose not to. My revenge wasn't spectacle, it was competence. It was doing the job so well that even their sabotage couldn't eclipse me. As the orchestra swelled in the ballroom and applause followed the opening speech, I exhaled slowly. Twist number 8 had landed. Not in fire, but in quiet mastery. The evening carried on with the shimmer of champagne and applause, but events rarely go untouched by chaos. Halfway through the gala dinner, just as the keynote speaker prepared to take the stage, the sound system sputtered, screeched, and went silent. The microphone cracked like breaking glass before it cut entirely. A room full of wealthy donors turned as one, murmurs rising like static. Then the second blow hit. At the front row, 2 VIP donors stood glaring at one another. Their seating cards had been duplicated, placing both in the same prestigious seat reserved beside the event sponsor. It was a clash of egos waiting to erupt, one that threatened to unravel the gala in front of the very people Evelyn needed to impress. Eyes swung toward her. She froze, smile brittle, glass of wine suspended in midair. She looked like a queen, stripped of her script. Maya hovered at her side, phone poised, as if ready to capture someone else's humiliation for once. But now it was their stage that teetered. I felt every gaze shift to me, staff instinctively seeking direction. For a second I could hear my own heartbeat echo against the marble walls. Then muscle memory returned, the same instinct that had carried me through blackouts at Santoro's, through tantrums of overbooked guests at Luminara. "Bring me the spare floor plan," I ordered calmly into my headset. A staffer sprinted. I crouched by a side table, sketching alternate seat assignments, calculating quickly who could be shifted without insult. Within minutes, I had a new plan. Rotate 3 tables, move the sponsor's family to the second row with upgraded wine service, and seat the conflicting VIPs together but flanked by buffers. Other respected guests who could smooth egos with conversation. I straightened, adjusted my blazer, and walked directly to the donors. Smiling, I said warmly, "Gentlemen, forgive the oversight. We've prepared an exclusive arrangement that allows both of you to be recognised properly. If you'll allow me, I'll escort you myself." My voice was confident, carrying just enough authority to override offence. To my relief, their shoulders eased. They followed as I led them to their adjusted seats. Meanwhile, my staff replaced the placards and poured top-shelf champagne as though this had been planned all along. At the same time, I coordinated with the AV crew to reroute the sound system through backup speakers hidden in the ballroom. Within 15 minutes, the microphone buzzed back to life. The keynote speaker took the stage to thunderous applause, the disruption already fading into memory. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Evelyn, standing before the stage, raised her glass. Her voice, amplified by the newly repaired system, rang out across the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to pause for a moment. Tonight could have gone quite differently without the skill of our management. My daughter, Lauren Pierce, ensured this evening remained the success you see before you. Please join me in thanking her." The applause that followed filled the hall, echoing off marble and chandeliers. Faces turned toward me, clapping, smiling. Evelyn's mask remained composed, but her words had already escaped into the air, captured forever by microphones and cameras. And Maya, oh Maya, her phone trembled in her grip as she realised she was recording not my downfall, but my recognition. Her smirk had vanished, replaced by a stiffness that betrayed her fury. For the first time, Evelyn had been forced to acknowledge me publicly, not as a burden, not as invisible, but as the reason her gala still stood intact. It wasn't affection, but it was truth, and truth was enough. Later, as the last guests filtered out, I checked my phone. A message from Anita Patel awaited me. "The court has accepted the video evidence. Maya's post qualifies as proof of intentional humiliation. We'll use it in the next hearing." I exhaled slowly, a smile tugging at my lips. The irony was rich. Maya, who weaponized her camera to shame me, had handed me the very tool that would protect me legally. Standing at the back of the ballroom, I watched the staff clear glasses, the chandeliers dimming one by one. My reflection caught in the polished glass doors. Not a scapegoat, not the daughter discarded, but a woman who had saved the night, who carried her own dignity like a banner. The night's disasters had threatened to unravel me, but instead they had lifted me higher. Twist number 9 had landed. The stage that once humiliated me had become the ground where I claimed my voice. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, lined with dull wood panels and fluorescent lights that hummed faintly overhead. Yet to me, it felt larger than any ballroom at Hartwell. Here, truth mattered more than polish, and the performance Evelyn had perfected for decades could not protect her. At the front table, Ethan sat beside his attorney, shifting in his chair, eyes fixed downward. Evelyn was directly behind him, pearls at her throat, back stiff as marble. Maya hovered near, phone tucked away for once, her jaw set. I sat across from them with Anita Patel, who exuded calm confidence in her navy suit. The judge called us to order. Papers shuffled, pens clicked. When Anita began her opening remarks, her voice was steady, deliberate. She laid the foundation simply. This was not a divorce born of incompatibility, but of premeditated humiliation. She presented the pink envelope itself, the butterflies on its surface gleaming under the fluorescent light. This was not a birthday card, Anita said. It was a weapon. Then came the video, Maya's own upload, projected onto the courtroom screen. The clip ended on my still frame, the cut designed to suggest collapse. Anita paused before continuing, but as multiple witnesses will testify, this edit was selective. It was posted with the intent to humiliate. And humiliation, Your Honour, was the point of the entire event. Witnesses were called, 2 guests who had attended the dinner. They described the scene with surprising clarity. Evelyn sliding the envelope, Maya filming, Ethan holding his phone, ready. They testified that I hadn't broken down. Instead, I had signed calmly, thanked them, and revealed my job offer. Their words turned the narrative on its head. The judge leaned forward, brows knit. So the recording was edited to exclude this? Yes, Your Honour, the witness replied. The truth is, she didn't collapse. She stood. Anita introduced the gala staff report as well, testimony that Evelyn's own event at the Luminara nearly collapsed under logistical chaos, yet I had salvaged it, ensuring her public image remained intact. Irony layered upon irony. In one arena, they sought to destroy me. In another, I had shielded them from disgrace. When Evelyn's lawyer attempted to argue, the judge cut him short. This court is not a stage for reputational games. The evidence demonstrates intent to humiliate. That speaks volumes about the character of the parties involved. His gavel struck once, the sound crisp, final. The ruling came swiftly. The divorce was granted on my terms. No alimony to Ethan, no shared debts, no concessions. The court acknowledged the orchestrated cruelty as justification. I walked out free. Not only legally, but spiritually, the weight of their control severed. Outside, the sun was bright, the air cool. Anita clasped my hand. You did more than endure, Lauren. You showed them what dignity looks like. As I walked toward my car, I thought about the phrase that had haunted me. Being abandoned by your own family. For years, I had believed that rejection defined me. But in that moment, clarity came. Abandonment wasn't a definition, it was a choice they made. And family wasn't blood, it was the people who saw me, respected me, stood beside me. At Luminara, I had found that family, Jessica, who trusted me with leadership, Sophia, who welcomed me with warmth, the night staff who laughed with me during lulls. They were not bound to me by name, yet they honoured me more than my own blood ever had. That evening I stopped by Santoro's, slipping through the familiar back door. The air smelled of garlic and tomato, pans clattering in rhythm. Lupita spotted me first, her face breaking into a grin. She wiped her hands on her apron and hugged me tight. Look at you, she said, stepping back to admire the blazer, the polished shoes. Hotel manager already, eh? Not yet, I laughed, but closer. Mr. Santoro came out, wiping flour from his hands. We heard about the gala. You did good, Lauren. You always had it in you. I looked around at the bustling kitchen, at the place where my worth had first been recognised when no one else would. My throat tightened, but this time it wasn't with shame, it was gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me when others didn't." As I left, the night air wrapped around me, carrying the hum of the city. I walked not as someone cast out, but as someone who had chosen where she belonged. The court had given me freedom, my work had given me dignity, and the people who respected me had given me something my blood never could, a family worth claiming. A year passed like a tide reshaping the shoreline. The scars of my old life faded into faint lines, reminders rather than wounds. At Luminara, my role had expanded. I wasn't just managing nights and guest services anymore. I was leading initiatives, mentoring new hires, shaping the very culture that had once saved me. But the truest sign of change came when I stood at the podium of our ballroom, addressing a crowd gathered for something I had built myself. The Pierce Foundation Scholarship for Service Excellence. The idea had grown quietly over months, born from gratitude to Santoro's and to every unseen worker who had carried me when I thought I had no worth. Now it lived in polished banners and smiling faces. The fund would provide training grants for frontline service workers, servers, housekeepers, clerks. People told they were invisible, the very people Evelyn once scorned. And the first sponsor to step forward, Linda Harrington, the woman who had once raised an eyebrow at me across Hartwell's tables, now clasped my hand warmly. "What you did that night changed the way I saw things," she confessed softly. "It's time women like you lead, not follow." Her donation made the scholarship possible. The irony was not lost on me. A bridge had been built from the rubble Evelyn left, but not by her, by someone who chose to see me clearly. As guests filtered through registration that evening, I spotted her. Evelyn. She stood near the check-in desk, pearls still around her neck, clutch in hand. But this time there was no commanding presence. She looked lost. The line for entry required digital confirmation, and she fumbled with her phone, her fingers stiff, her expression tight with embarrassment. I could have let her flounder. Once she would have relished my discomfort in public. But revenge had already played its course. What remained was choice. I stepped forward, offering the same warm smile I'd perfected for 1,000 guests. "May I help you, ma'am?" She looked up, startled, recognition flashing across her face. For a moment, pride and resistance warred in her eyes, but then, slowly, she nodded. "Yes, thank you." I guided her through the process, tapping gently on her phone, retrieving her QR code, printing her badge. My movements were efficient, kind, impersonal. She was a guest, nothing more, nothing less. As she adjusted her badge, something slipped from her clutch, a jewelled hairpin, delicate, unmistakable. I bent, picked it up, and held it out. "You drop this." Her hand hovered as she accepted it, eyes meeting mine. I saw no triumph there, no venom. Only something muted, fragile. Perhaps regret, perhaps not. It didn't matter. "I wish you a pleasant evening," I said simply, stepping back. There was no embrace, no reconciliation, only boundaries drawn in the marble between us. I had not come here to reclaim her. I had come here to reclaim myself. Later, when the scholarship dinner concluded and applause echoed through the ballroom, I returned to my office. The city stretched beyond the window, its lights blinking like stars fallen to earth. I opened the top drawer of my desk, where 2 envelopes lay side by side, one blush pink, decorated with butterflies, containing a copy of the divorce decree. The other, ivory, stamped with Luminara's crest, my first offer letter. 2 halves of one story, destruction and rebirth. Weapons turned into milestones. I touched them both gently, then closed the drawer. Freedom had not been a gift my mother gave me. It had been something I claimed, something I carried forward every day I walked into the lobby. Every time I lifted someone else with a dignity I had once been denied. The arc of my life had bent not toward their approval, but toward peace. And in that peace I discovered the final truth. Abandonment was not the end of me. It was the beginning.